What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another After Action Report. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about the Battleshock Grand Tournament, which is in the Southwest Bay area. I don't know exactly. I don't know SF very well. So, anyway, I went to that event with a couple of the Gits from the Gatehammer Club that I generally play with, and we had a great time over there. Before we really get launched into it, I do want to say thank you very much to Game Castle, the store who was hosting us, and of course the main organizer, Chris, and then Jake Nelson, who was also judging that. So it was a lot of fun going out there, and we had a good time. Funny tidbit about the event. Every game, the entire event, I was supposed to be playing on the same table, except for one where in my final table, my opponent asked, like, hey, do you want to go play on this table instead? It's a little bit easier to move around. It's not quite as cramped. I was like, yeah, sounds good. But I was on the same table officially the entire tournament. So let's go ahead and start off by talking a little bit about the list that I brought to this event. If you're more interested in seeing the list and what I was trying to do with it, I do have another video, Wapow, that you can go ahead and take a look at. But we'll go over this real quick. So the main thing to note is, you take a look at the title, Battleshock, aka How Do I Survive World Eaters on WTC. Both of the top World Eaters players who were coming to this event ended up dropping. So I built my list around playing around armies that ended up not being stuff I need to worry about at all. However, ended up being pretty useful anyway. So anyway, playing guard as always. Gaunt's Ghost, Lord Solar by himself, Militarum Tempestus Command Squad, a tank commander with the Grand Strategist enhancement, Demolisher, Double Plasma, one unit of Cadians, two units of Catachan, two Chimeras with heavy bolters, one unit of six Bullgryn, one Hellhound with a heavy bolter in the hull, two Luminous battle tanks with multi-meltas, one Luminous Exterminator with plasma, two units of three Ogryn, one unit of Aquilons, and then one big unit of Scions to attach to the Tempestus command squad. And like I said, this was mostly trying to deal with the fact that we were playing on Search and Destroy all of day one on WTC. And I talk a lot more about this in my video going over the prep, and we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about how that affected my games throughout the course of the day, or throughout the course of the weekend. So, as you guys already know, I do a fair amount of like tracking of people that are going to this event, or rather going to any of the events that I end up going to. And this one was, pretty middle of the pack, I'd say. It was a pretty normal looking, uh, small to medium sized GT. Ended up having a total of 28 players play at least one game in the event. And realistically, the main things that I was worried about is there were several World Eaters players who are going to be very strong. And then Ruben Zhao, a player who is now qualified for the Team USA Academy and has an opportunity to play at the WTC next year. Euless Sanders and Majd, I think I heard his name said. And then Jake Nelson were like the main people I was trying to play against. But then there was Grey Knights, and then I knew Necrons, Sisters, and Eldar. So these were all pretty much what we were expecting. I was a little bit worried that Jake might have ended up bringing GSC because I have not yet figured out that matchup because there's not a lot of people who play it. Anyway, but yeah, pretty normal stuff coming through. You have a lot of people kind of like at all ranges of the 40K. And of course, I was going to this one with the idea that I was going to be trying to win a GT before the end of the year. So, with that, I already showed you we were playing WTC for the weekend, which is fairly unusual for the West Coast in particular. I think I played on WTC like 3 games ever before I went to this event, so it was definitely a bit of a learning curve to try and adjust to how different the terrain oftentimes is. It's way more grid-like than a lot of like Pariah Nexus layouts, which is better and worse. It's different. Anyway, let's go ahead and start talking about our first game. So my round one opponent was Bob Porter, and he was playing Dark Angels Gladius, and he had Azrael, a lieutenant with the crit fives or the super crits enhancement, a Brutalis Dreadnought, 3 units of Deathwing Knights, all with maces, 1 unit of Eradicators, 1 Gladiator Lancer, 1 big unit of Hellblasters, 1 unit of Infiltrators, and a Repulsor. So pretty normal looking stuff overall in terms of Gladius Task Force. Um, I mean, the big things that kind of stuck out to me were like the Brutalis is not super common, but I have heard that it has become more common ever since like Deathwing Knights went up in points. But he still had the Eradicator, he still had the Gladiator Lancer, and the Repulsor. So he still had like plenty of beat sticks ready to go in and be very aggressive. So for our first mission, we were playing Mission J officially. Linchpin, Raise Banners, and Search and Destroy. However, I made a mistake. So one of the things that I always do before I go to a tournament is I will fill out all of the tabletop battles such that I can just like hit the first one and be like, okay, here's the mission. And what I had already done is I have another GT coming up this next weekend called Mad Alpaca. So I just went into Mad Alpaca, and the problem with that is Mad Alpaca's first mission is Mission O, which is not what I just said. Mission O is Terraform, Stalwarts, and Crucible of Battle. And I remember, like, one of my buddies was at a table next to me, and he was saying something that was like, "Oh, it's Linchpin Raised Banners," and I was like, "Wait a second, that is not what I thought we were playing." And so we were already about like halfway done with the deployment by the time we realized that, like, wait a second, I had set up for Crucible of Battle, but we were actually playing Search and Destroy instead. And I asked Bob, "Hey, this is my bad. What do you want to do?" And he was like, "Let's play the Linchpin Raised Banners, but we'll do it as Crucible of Battle." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine by me. It's not what I had expected, or rather, it's not what we were supposed to be playing. But like, I'm down with that. If you're down with that, like, we can just go ahead and play. We will agree on the result as it is." So it ends up being not Search and Destroy, which I think ends up unintentionally being better for me than it was normally supposed to, but that's kind of what we agreed to do, and we play from there. So honestly, most of this game was spent skirmishing over the objective here and the objective here. Because what Bob ended up doing was he had like 2 units of Deathwing Knights like here, and then 1 unit here, and then he had like his Hellblasters unit here, and the Brutalis Dreadnought was like down here, ended up hanging out in here for a lot of the game. And in general, once the game started and we rolled off and I knew that I was going second, I was like, okay, well, I don't really have to do anything. I'm going second on Linchpin, so I can just build my advantage there. As long as I prevent Bob from holding a lot of primary throughout the course of the game, I'm going to end up winning. And I think one of the major things that I talked about during the other video is that there's like these triangles like here where if you're in here, you really can't get shot from this direction, and the same thing on the other side. And I don't think that's something that Bob really had thought about or had put into his game plan at all. Because if he had like a unit of Deathwing Knights and just like marched them into this triangle, I don't know how I'm getting rid of them. Like, my only real way to counteract them is to take like a unit of Bullgryn here and then charge onto the point and then try and use Lord Solar parked here to duty and honor. But that's still scary because when he's playing Gladius, he has access to the once per game fallback and shoot and charge, which means that the Deathwing Knights could potentially run in and kill Lord Solar and just cause a whole mess of things in my side of the field. Bob ended up being like a really fun opponent for the most part, but I think he was really missing out on how to effectively use the Gladius Task Force reactive move, because I remember there was at least one time he had like 4 OC on this point, and I took a bunch of Catachan and put like 2 guys on here for 4 OC in order to deny it from him. But the big thing about this was he had like this unit of Hellblasters who was specifically not touching the point, where if he had spent like 1 CP, and even just moved like 1 more guy onto this, it could have scored him 5 points and forces me to deal with this unit of Hellblasters as well. But missing those kind of opportunities ends up meaning that he misses out on a lot of effective movement and also a lot of effective OC. But my whole game plan was I'm already an army that is better at scoring secondary, and as long as I can make sure that Bob doesn't have this really big primary advantage on me, I'm going to win the game. And I think probably the most important play that ended up solidifying this is Bob had his unit of infiltrators something like this, right? And they have like this 12-inch aura where you cannot touch. But one thing that I did notice was uh, after he had finished his movement on turn 2, I had an opportunity to rapid ingress my unit of Aquilons here, where they were outside of the 12-inch range. He had like Deathwing Knights that were like here and like Hellblasters here, such that they could not see the Aquilons when I dropped them in. And these Aquilons were perfectly safe. And this unit of Aquilons was able to do 2 things. The first thing was that they got me this objective. So I ended up scoring an extra 5 primary from dropping in these Aquilons because I would control them going into turn 2. My turn 2. The other thing that they did was there's only, I think there was like 1 or maybe 2 OC on this point that Bob had. And that meant I set them up in such a way where if I rolled a 1, I was going to be able to put 2 OC onto this point off in advance. And so, when it was my turn to like come around, these Aquilons advanced. I rolled like I think I rolled like a 4, so I was able to just completely deny this primary from him. And so on turn 1, or on his turn 2, Bob only ended up controlling his home because I had put like Catachan on here to create like a ring around his Deathwing Knight so that they could not charge through my guys into like tanks or anything like that. And then on turn 3, he ended up holding nothing because I had denied him this one. I was auto-saying him on this one. And I also now had Aquilons on his home objective, which was demanding a response. And then other than that, like the game kind of played like you might expect it to play. I had already built up a massive lead, so on my turn 2, because I had Rapid Ingress the Aquilons, I ended up scoring a 13 on primary, because he had a unit of like Deathwing Knights. He had like one unit of Deathwing Knights like doing an action. I think it was like Sabotage in this spot, and then he had another unit of Deathwing Knights that was here, which went for the Assault Doctrine Advance and Charge and missed the 5-inch charge rerolling. So I just had like 20 OC worth of Catachan just on this objective. So they are just there, and I'm able to score that. And I think even if I hadn't scored this objective, I was still going to be up 5 primary on turn 2, and then on turn 3, I ended up going up plus 13 primary, so a total of like plus 18 minimum. Ended up being a plus 23, or yeah, plus 23 over 2 turns, and that's just a lead that is pretty much unrecoverable coming through, especially on Linchpin Raised Banners. So I ended up closing out this one pretty easily. Bob was a great guy. He was able to recover his position and at least score points on his points, or like his objectives, but he was never really able to get me off of mine at all. And so I ended up winning this one pretty handily. And overall, I ended up winning this one pretty handily, 97 to 62. Bob was a great guy. I gave him some like pointers on like how to use his reactive moves a little bit more proactively in order to like secure him some primary and also just get bonus movement off of his Deathwing Knights. But yeah, fun time. Great guy, really lovely opponent. I offered, I invited him to go get lunch with us, and he was like, I want to go get sandwiches instead. So, we went and got Hawaiian barbecue. But yeah, overall, I would say this game was just a very controlled win. There was not any real part of this game where I was feeling unduly worried. Like, there was the one spot here where he missed a 5-inch charge, but even if he hit the charge, I was okay with that because I was just going to kill the Deathwing Knights immediately afterwards. Yeah, that was a fun time. Cool. Moving on to the second round, I ended up playing up against Charles Depew, or he said he also goes by Charlie, and he was playing Warhorde Orks. And he was playing Warhorde Orks, the one that gets sustained on everything. So he was running Mosrog Scragbad, the big guy on the like Super Squig. Zodgrod Wartsnaga, the guy that makes Gretchen super runs. A beast boss, 2 war bosses, a weird boy, 1 unit of 10 beast snagas, 3 units of 10 boys, 2 units of Burna boys, 2 units of Gretchen, 1 20 Gretchen, 1 10 Gretchen, 2 units of 5 knobs, 1 unit of 5 storm boys, a big unit of Squighawk boys, which I did not realize was 320 points for that unit. 1 unit of Warbikers, 1 unit of Defcoptas, and then 2 trucks. So it was basically like dudes and trucks, and it was a little bit of an unusual list. This is not a list that I've generally seen a lot of Orc players go for. This time, we actually did play the proper mission. And that mission was Mission K, Scorched Earth, Stalwarts, and Search and Destroy. So Scorched Earth, of course, you're burning objectives. Stalwarts is the one where Battle Lion can do actions even while they're engaged or if they shoot. And then Search and Destroy, of course, is the proper deployment. I'll be honest, guys, going into this game, I was kind of worried because he has a lot of boys and a lot of things in trucks, and the main thing that I was really worried about is if my opponent goes first and he calls the wall on turn 1 or 2, there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to be losing because his threat range is absolutely massive across the entire army. However, I got very lucky this game in that I was going first into Orks, meaning that because they have to call their Wa at the beginning of the battle round, He has to declare his wall, and then I have an entire turn to set up to make sure that he only ever hits what I want him to hit on the wall. So one of the main things that ended up happening in this game was Charles put his unit of super runs right in here, and then they scouted forward, and they're like -1 to wound grots. So like instead of wounding them on 2s, I'm wounding them on 3s. But one of the big things that I was actually worried about with this unit is that it is like 41 OC or something absolutely ridiculous like that. And I was really worried that he could just like plop this on my objective, and then I was going to be not in control of it for multiple turns. So this was actually a unit that I was more intimidated by than I think a lot of people would necessarily expect, because one of the major things is he can just hit a charge, and then it's going to take me multiple turns to dig myself out of that OC hole on this turn over here, or on this objective over here. So what I end up doing on my first turn, I take my Chimera, it scouts up 6, and then I actually move it such that it can see the grots over here, and I actually use it to kill almost all of the grots because I really wanted that unit dead. But probably the single most impactful thing that happened during this game was I had my Chimera somewhere in here touching the objective, and at the top of 2, Charlie calls the wall. And what I end up doing is I disembark the Catachan from this Chimera, and I create a screen something like this. Okay? And one of the things that I had not really thought about super effectively was the fact that he was running Burnaboys in his trucks. And they have 4 flamers, so they have a pretty good chance of actually just like killing a unit of Catachan by just burning them out. The other major part of it is I had a unit of Bullgryn somewhere in here, kind of like creating this line such that if he were to charge like this, the only real thing he'll find in the middle of the board is these Bullgryn, which I'm like, okay, fine. So on his turn, Charlie takes his unit of Burner Boys out of a truck that's around here, and they plop them here, and then he has this giant unit of Squighog Boys that are here. But there's a couple of things. One, these Squighog Boys cannot go through the wall here. They can't go this way really because they're mounted, and they would lose a lot of movement. They cannot go through this box, so they would either have to go around this way, guaranteed to go into Bullgryn, or he's going to have to kill this unit of Catachan and then try and charge the Chimera, which it was his plan, and I think it was a good plan. However, he ends up taking the Burner Boys, and they go wah, and they kill most of this unit of Catachan. So I have 2 dudes left. And so then he's Orks. He takes all of his other shooting. He takes all of his like random pistols and rockets and whatever, and it all hits on 5s. And so then he tries to shoot the rest of them and kill the last 2 Catachan that I have standing in this one spot. And if he kills both of them, these Squighog Boys are just going to charge directly onto the point, and it's going to be a massive problem for me to try and deal with. However, he does not kill all of them. He kills one of them. So there's still a single lone Catachan standing right here in the middle. And what he can do is, Mozrog is too big. Mozrog is too big to fit past him on either side between the crate or the wall. However, he is able to get a couple of Squighog Boys by declaring a multi-charge, order for the Squighog Boys to go, and, he's got, like, something like this at the end of the charge, and he's got, like, a couple more guys back here. However, in so doing this, there's not a way for him to get this charge off such that I cannot get a heroic intervention. So after he does this, the one lone Catachan stops most of the Squighog Boys from getting into the Chimera, and it also allows my Bullgryn to go for a heroic intervention here, and they're able to, just smack around to the Squighog Boys for quite a while in this game. And even though the Squighog Boys are fairly good at punching through Bullgryn because it's a lot of low AP damage 1 attacks that they end up actually throwing out, by getting the extra movement on my Bullgryn, getting an extra turn of swinging with them, I end up doing a lot more damage to the Squighog Boys than I should have done if they were able to get into the Chimera. So after that, my natural expansion was fairly secure, but I was still putting pressure onto his natural expansion over here. Because I still had, like, a Leonar's Battle Tank, like a Chimera, Ogryn, and I dropped Aquilons somewhere over here in order to kill, like, a marked for death target that he had put over in this area. I was Deathcopters that were doing containment, I think it was. And anyway, I was able to put enough pressure onto this objective that I I was able to hold it and burn it later on into the game. So I was pulling into this game with a primary lead going first on Scorched Earth, and I was also pulling a pretty significant secondary lead going into Charlie because I just have more things, and I had devoted more stuff, or he had almost completely devoted his army to try and go into my natural objective, and I had devoted enough of my army to overpower him on his natural objective, and so we're kind of playing Dawn of War. The last big thing that Charlie ended up having an issue with is like he had a truck full of boys and he ends up calling a secret mission, which was later revealed to be the one where you need battle line in your opponent's side of the board. And then your opponent needs battle line that's not there. So I still had a unit of like Cadians in here. And if I was thinking a little bit better, I probably could have taken this unit and just like advanced it twice over in this direction so it gets out of my deployment zone. But he took this truck and he moved it a turn early. On turn 4, he ended up moving it out right to here, and so I still had Lehman Russes like here and here that killed the truck, and then mostly killed the boys as well. And then I was able to charge the boys, and then they were just not going to live going into turn 5. So he ended up making a big mistake, forgetting what turn it actually was, which made the game more of a blowout. He probably should have been in like the low 70s if he had remembered what turn it actually was, but instead he put himself on a score of 51. And so at the end of this one, I ended up winning this one 90 to 51. It was fairly controlled overall once again, and I got really lucky that I had this one Catachan surviving over here because it was what made the game fairly controlled. It did mean that these Quick Hawk boys were not able to do what they needed to. I was able to control both sides of the map fairly easily, and overall, Charlie just did not have the reach in order to put enough pressure onto both my expansion and my home objective at the same time. I was able to clean up all the tools. All right, and that puts us into round 3. I'm already 2-0 in this event, feeling pretty good. I feel like I'm playing pretty well. The games have been pretty controlled, and I play up against Andrew and his Blood Angels in the Liberator Assault Group. So he had the captain with the Super Smash enhancement with like Sustain 3 and whatever other nonsense it has. Captain Terminator armor, Commander Dante Lamartis, one unit of Assault Intercessors, one unit of Normal Intercessors, 3 units of Assault Intercessors with jump packs, a Ballistus Dread, one big brick of Death Company, one Land Raider, unit of Sanguinary Guard, a Scout Squad, and a Terminator Squad. This was a little bit unusual. I'm not used to seeing Terminators very often at all, basically in anything that's not Green Knights, to be honest. But he had a little bit of shooting, plenty of assault, and a couple of big bricks, right? The Death Company break is pretty threatening, the Sanguinary Guard is pretty threatening, the Smash Captain is pretty threatening, and then the Land Raider ends up also being a bit of an issue over the course of the game. And on this one, we were playing Mission L, Take and Hold Hidden Supplies and Search and Destroy. So this game started off really interesting. So I had a Hellhound somewhere in here with the idea that I wanted to put this Hellhound here if I could. And Andrew is probably one of the most entertaining like players I played against in a while. But actually both Charles and Andrew were super funny to play against. Andrew and I probably made like more like kind of crass jokes back at back and forth at each other throughout the course of the game because we kind of both realized like, oh, we have both spent way too much time on Reddit over the years. So we kind of knew like some of the same dumb jokes that we were going to be throwing back and forth at each other. But Andrew made a couple of moves, some of which he was unlucky for, and then some of which I think were a pretty big mistake. So he had his Ballistus Dread like start off here, which I think was fine, and then when he got first turn, he ended up drawing Establish Locus and Bring It Down. So he ended up not doing Establish Locus, which was a bit surprising to me because, like I said, there's like these triangles where you can just do it. But the Ballistus Dread came out to here, and then the Land Raider. And the Land Raider started here, and then he advanced it. The Hellhound was not here. It was actually, like, just poking out here. And so, with only one real target for Bring Down available to him, Andrew put all of the las cannons, so I think it was, like, 6 las cannons and some, like, other, like, crack missiles or whatever into the Hellhound here. And I popped smoke. I mean, he used Oath the Moment on it, whatever. And after all of his shooting is done, he does like 2 wounds to this Hellhound. And even I was pretty surprised, right? Like that number of las cannons should expect to do about half of the Hellhound if I pop smoke, simply because it's still hitting on fours we're rolling, so you're getting about 75%. So you're gonna get like 4 or 5 hits, and then you're gonna be wounding 2/3 of the time, so you're gonna be getting about 3 wounds through. Um, and then I have a 2-up base save, and I'm in cover, so I'm saving half of them. So I'm getting like he's getting like somewhere between like 1 and 2 las cannons to go through the save, on average. And he actually ended up only getting 1 to go through, and then he rolled a 1 on the damage. So the Hellhound was just not hurt at all. And that was the full Land Raider and the Ballistus Dread. But the other major problem that I think happened on this turn is he had his unit of Death Companies something like this, and he put them here. And I was like, I think I have won. Like, I think I win the game simply because this unit of Death Company, the big thing that I was expecting it to do was if you couldn't get a turn 1 charge off, which the only thing you could really charge was like a unit of Bullgryn that was here, and of course he doesn't really want to do that, is the Death Company. They just run to here and they establish a locus, and then they demand answers. And the problem that I would have had at that point is I have this Land Raider, I have a unit of Death Company, and I don't really care about the Ballistus Dread. But I have things that I cannot really deal with. Like, I cannot both kill the Land Raider and the Death Company. So I'm going to have to leave this Land Raider alive, probably, and just try and kill as much of the Death Company as I can to remove this brick. And that gives him a lot of freedom in order to, like, bring in his JPIs, which I think there were, like, 2 of them here. And then opportunities to look for like the Sanguinary Guard or whatever the other like assault intercessors. He can put a lot more pressure on my army if the Death Company are used kind of as a sacrifice, or even just to demand answers from. Like he can pop Armor of Contempt, and suddenly I'm not even killing that many of them, but I still need to kill as many of them as I can. So I will overexpose myself, and then it will mean that he has a lot of tools to be very aggressive. Anyway, so when the Death Company ended up going here instead, I was very happy about that. So on my turn, I end up drawing Overwhelming Force and Containment, so I get my free 6 points out on the rest of the map. I put like a Chimera here-ish. The Hellhound moved out to here to try and shoot at the Land Raider, and I bring Tank Commander, Exterminator, Leman Russ Battle Tank, and Chimera with Ogryn out here such that everything can shoot into the Land Raider. And then I go, okay, I'm going to pop 2 CP. I really want this Land Raider dead. 1, it's worth 3 points to me to kill for Overwhelming Force. And 2, I don't want you to be holding any objectives, if I can help it. And I spend my 2 CP on Fields of Fire. I shoot it with the Hellhound first, so it is already +1 AP ignoring cover. He pops Armor of Contempt. And then I shoot out with an Exterminator, so my entire army is +2 AP ignoring cover. And then, with Armor of Contempt, everything is effectively +1 AP ignoring cover. And it takes my entire army to kill this Land Raider, because every single time I get like a Melta or a Las Cannon or a Demolisher Cannon shot through, I roll 1s and 2s for my damage. And so finally he's like, come on, you got to do more than that. This crack missile or the 100 killer missile's got to do more than that. You got to do more than that. And then I roll 1 on the damage, and it's like, okay, my bad, I guess, because my whole goal was I was going to use all these tanks in order to kill the Land Raider, and this Chimera here, like, yes, it could shoot at the Land Raider, but I actually wanted it to shoot at the assault intercessors that ended up spilling out something like this after the Land Raider died. Because that was my way in order to try and deny this objective from him, was I was going to kill the Land Raider, and then I was going to force a battle shock test on the guys that were actually on the objective afterwards, because I was going to kill more than half of them. And that didn't quite go to plan. So he ends up like doing no damage to my Hellhound, and then it takes me my entire army. So I just want to count. So it's 220 or 240 from the Tank Commander, 340 for the 2 Leman Russes. So that's like 600 points. The Hellhound puts us up to like 700. Then the Chimera, that's like 800 points of shooting that I put into the Land Raider and 2 CP. And I like exactly kill it. So it was definitely a very odd moment for both of us to just like look at it and be like, wow, that was wild. Anyway, the rest of the game ends up being a fairly controlled win once again. Like I said, he had a couple of like JPIs that are over here, which like were a little bit annoying and trying to get me off of this. But even though they killed the Chimera spilled guys out like over here because he full wraps it, so I get like the 6-inch disembark instead of killing it and then like piling into my guys in order to get more people onto this objective. But anyway, I end up holding two. He ends up holding two. And then a major problem for him over the course of the game was I created so much space on my side of the board. Like I had like a Hellhound here, I had like guys here, I had Aquilons who had like dropped in here, something like that. I had the Scions who were like here to like shoot him off at this objective, and then I just had things like everywhere, so that when it was finally his turn to like try and rapid ingress things, the only space he really had to like rapid ingress as like sanguinary guard was like here, which he did. But like I've already won a major victory when I'm forcing you to rapid ingress a melee threat into your own side of the board. And so once again, this game ended up being a very controlled win. I ended up maxing out primary pretty easily. I did enough of secondaries to score 40 points on secondary, and so I end up winning this one 100 to 51. I think this was already a tough matchup for Andrew. He said he was very familiar with it because he has another friend named Josh who also plays guard, and they just kill Marines super efficiently. But I think the biggest issue, like I said, I think if this Death Company had just come here on turn one and then asked difficult questions, I don't think he realized how hard it is to shoot people on that middle objective. Then he also got unlucky in not killing the Hellhound that was here. But either way, I think it was just another melee army that didn't fully understand how much pressure to put on me. Even if the Death Company unit died, and it's an expensive unit, even if the Death Company died and it is an expensive unit to lose, it means that so much of my army is devoted to trying to do other things on the rest of the board. All right. Next, let's go into round 4, where I ended up playing up against Dash and his Awakened Dynasty Necrons. And he definitely was bringing a bit of an off-the-wall list that I haven't really seen before. But he was already 3-0, so it's like one of those things where it's like, even if I don't understand it, it's clearly working for this guy, so it's something I have to respect quite a bit. He was bringing the Nightbringer, 2 Hexmark Destroyers, Illuminor Xeras, Imatech the Stormlord, a Locust Lord with the up-down enhancement, a Scorpic Lord, a Locust Lord with the up-down enhancement, Scorpic Lord with the 4-up Feel No Pain enhancement, 2 more Scorpic Lords, the Silent King, 1 Canoptic Reanimator, 1 unit of Flayed Ones, 1 unit, or 1 Locust Destroyer, 1 unit of 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers, and then 2 units of 3 Scorpic Destroyers. On this one, we were playing Mission A, Take and Hold, Raise Banners, and Tipping Point. And if you look at this, terrain map, you can kind of see that it's just very different from what we were playing on day one. Day one on the Search and Destroy with that terrain was absolutely brutal. Like, melee armies could get so much pressure on you on turn 1 that it ended up being very difficult. However, the flip side to that was this one on day 2 was very shooting favored. And a big reason for this is if you take a look at like these firing lanes, this firing lane is really long. There are brutal firing lanes like this in order to try and control space, and your natural objective here is easier for you to stage from in order to put pressure on them than it is for your opponent to stage here and then try and charge onto you, because of how easy it is to park something here that can shoot, move it out a little bit, and then shoot down this way in order to shoot anything off. And so you would think that the answer is like, okay, maybe you stage here instead, but I mean, this isn't better, right? Like, there's not really good staging areas to go to. So if you want to go for any kind of real staging, you're actually staging like all the way back here. Because if you're closer, then you don't have to get that close to shoot here. But if you're back here, it's like maybe you can do it, but this is still like this is close to 20 inches, right? So there's a 20, here's a 20. Yeah, this is like a 20-inch like threat range that you need to have in order to even go for this. And I'll start off by saying, once again, Dash was a lovely opponent. We ended up playing on a clock at his request, and then one of the things that we ended up doing was because the round timer started, and we still had to reset the board from the previous day to the new terrain layout. We ended up starting our clock later than it was supposed to be, and it ended up being like 15 to 20 minutes later than the round timer actually was. So we were the clock that we were playing on was not very accurate, and then the TO was a little annoyed with us, and it was a weird situation overall. So I only ended up playing 4 rounds, but I'm pretty sure we mathed it out afterwards. It was not really possible for my opponent to have come back at the end. But anyway, this game, once again, I ended up going first on this one, and on take and hold, it's a little bit tough to go first because you do have to be aggressive. You do need to try and hold your opponent to as little primary as possible early on in the game so that you can make bigger plays later on. Or rather, so that you can have an advantage going into bottom of 5, because if your opponent has bottom of 5, then they are going to score a lot of primary and get a lot of, and do whatever secondaries they want for free. So it's oftentimes a very big bottom of 5 scoring game for whoever's going second on take and hold. And I was able to do that this game. So generally, I had expected most people, if they're going to have their flayed ones, like the places that you naturally put them, like here and here, depending on what you're trying to do. Like if they're here, you already have people on the objective, and if they're here, then you can potentially threaten turn 1 charges while also staging in a fairly safe area at the beginning of the game. However, what Dash ended up doing is he took his flayed ones, and they were kind of strung out something like this. And Dash was very early on running into the issue where, he can put his Scorpex units here, here, and here. But where do they go next, right? Like, these units are probably going to try and go here. This unit can maybe try and come around, but like we said, it's a very far charge. And if I just stand on the very back edge of my objective, it is very difficult for him to actually get to that point because it's just too far. There was some safe area here where if you actually draw out the lines of sights, I think at one point he was able to take a unit of Scorpex, something like this, in order to create a bit of a safety zone for himself. But what I ended up trying to do this game was I was just going to say I'm going to try and hold my opponent to as few primary as possible. If I can hold him to a 5 or even a 0 every turn, that is going to be my path to victory. And so he ends up putting, I think it's like Illumina Rosaris or something, like one character here, and on top of 2, I end up taking a Hellhound and parking it here in order to cancel out this objective, make sure that nobody holds it going into his turn. I take a Chimera that starts here, and it disgorges Catachan. No, the Catachan were still inside. I actually just take the Chimera and just touch it like this, and all he has on this objective is a 1 OC hex mark or something like that, so he does not have enough OC, and I can take it from him by just popping the transport out. And then the third major thing, and we talked about this a little bit after the game, what I think he should have done was he ended up taking a Hexmark Destroyer and putting it in reserves. I'm pretty sure it's just supposed to start here. And because it's loan up, and if you just start it on the button, I cannot put any Aquilons. But what I was able to do was I was able to put Aquilons in some combination like this, such that they are 1, equalizing his OC on this point, and 2, going to be shooting at his unit. I do realize I made a small mistake by putting I think I only put 1 OC on this point, when I should have put a second OC on this point in case I didn't full kill the flayed ones, and then if he reanimated a second guy here onto the point, he would have actually held it. So I made a small mistake there. Should have put a second OC onto the point to make sure that he does not have access to that play if my dice go cold. But something I did not think about in the moment, and something I thought about right now. So helping you out with the advice from far away. And so anyway, what this ended up doing is on turn 2, in the bottom of 2, Dash ended up scoring 0 primary. because I was contesting his home, or yeah, I took his home from him. I was contesting the mid, and I had auto-seed him on his natural objective. And after that, we mostly went tit for tat in terms of like actually scoring things. We scored pretty even on secondaries overall. I did actually have a unit of Ogryn here at one point, and he dropped his heavy destroyers here in order to kill them. And I actually think I left them. Was it this unit that I left a lot? No, I ended up killing this unit immediately afterwards, but it does stop my recover assets that I was doing over here because these guys were the ones doing it and they died. But I remember thinking, like, I don't care that much because I still have Lord Solar. It is 3 points that I'm not getting and means I don't get to draw another one, but I'm still going to be doing quite well in secondary, kind of no matter what. Um, and then this unit, I was really kind of worried about how effective it was going to be into Bullgryn. So when it was shooting at Ogryn, I was like, okay, that's fine. Ogryn cost like a quarter of what Bullgryn do at this point in the game, and I was going to be able to kill this if I wanted to. Other than that, like I said, we were pretty much tit for tat. You know, it was basically, you would hold your home. Basically, you would hold your home, you would hold your natural, and we did that back and forth. Like, I just had, like, unit Catachan here, unit of Cadians here, such that I was holding, we were both holding 2, but because I had put him on a 0 on his turn 2, it ended up being one of the major parts of the thing. And then afterwards, there was, like, the judge comes over, is like, hey, your clock is, like, super wrong. You actually have, like, 20 less minutes than you guys think you do. And we were like, okay, well, what's the score? Is it even possible for me to come back or for him to come back? So the end score ends up being the end official score is 75 to 57 for me. But what we had worked out was I'm going to score another 10. So I'd be at 85 minimum if I had bricked all of my secondaries. And he had 57. So if he gets 15, 67, 72, and then he would need, wait, so 85, 72. He would need 13 points on secondaries after that. So even if he gets like maximum primary and draws really good secondaries, and I break my secondaries, it was not possible for him to come back. So it's like, yeah, well, we don't have time because we are already over time going into round 5, and so we ended up just calling it there. Really interesting list overall. I think one of the biggest things that I learned was that this 4 Philippines are stupid, dude. He had Illuminaris here, and I remember at one point I draw Assassination, and he had like the Nightbringer here and like Xeris somewhere on this middle point. And I had just put a unit of Scions into Illuminaris and did like 3 or 4 wounds to him. It was nuts. And then, because he was just like absolutely rocking his Feel No Pains. It was crazy. He was probably hitting like 2/3 of them on a 4+. And then I decided I think it's way easier if I just take my Leman Russ, and they all go for the Nightbringer, and then I bring like a Catachan guy here in order to chuck a grenade if I really need it. And I end up doing that and killing the Nightbringer because it was easier to kill than this thing with a 4-up Feel No Pain and a 4-up Invul. But yeah, that was the main game. Like, I just denying primary, recognizing, hey, I need to be a bit aggressive. I need to make sure my opponent is not scoring any primary as much as possible. And then, yeah, like we said, if he had put his hex mark here from the very beginning, he would have been 5 points closer throughout the course of the game. And I think it would have given him the opportunity to try and come back. But he didn't. And so it ended up being another fairly controlled win with some weird clock weirdness going on over the course of that one. All right. So with that, I am 4-0 and I'm ready to play at the final table because there are only 2 people who are 4 wins and no losses, and it is me and Ruben Zhao. And Ruben, I want to say, is not only one of the most generous people I've ever met, because after he won, he did not care about like the gift card that he won, and he's like, "Do you want this?" I'm like, "Sure." So I ended up buying myself some board games with it. But he's also one of the most generous players I have ever met. He's very, very much like, hey, just a heads up, you would be visible if you're doing that. It's like, oh, right, really? And so I double check, and he's like, yeah, I would be able to see you there. Like, hey, this is how this works. This is how that works. Blah blah blah. I'm gonna do this to make sure. And then so, it is remarkable how generous of a player he really is, and he is absolutely a better player than I am. I end up making like two, I think two like big mistake. Or okay, one big mistake and one like I feel like I've already lost and it's unrecoverable at this position mistake. Um, but yeah, uh, but Ruben was like for one of them was like, yeah, take that back. Like I'll let you move it such that you don't actually make that mistake. 'Cause, like, I appreciate it. Like, the game was already over. Like, I don't think there's any real way for me to um, win the game. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Ruben's list. He was playing Ultramarines First Company Task Force, and one of the things that he said about this, because he is very good. Ruben is already a very good player. I fully prepared to admit, I think he is better than me. However, he was saying if he brought like Grey Knights or one of his more normal Space Marine lists, he thought that the event would be too easy for him, and so he wanted to be the first person to win a GT with First Company Task Force. And spoiler alert, he does. So the big thing that he was trying to build around was he had this ancient and Terminator armor with the Fear Made Manifest enhancement. And Fear Made Manifest says that whenever something, I think it's within 6 inches of you, fails a battle shock test and it's not a monster or vehicle, one model in that unit dies. It's removed. There's no feel, no pains, no nothing. It's just gone. And once per game, you can make that D3 models. And so this is really, really scary if you are putting it next to things like Illuminor Ceres, who has a 4-up invul, 4-up feel no pain, and if he fails a battle shock, he's just gone. He's just dead. He also has a lieutenant with combi weapon, Robuti Gilliman, and this really matters because the First Company Task Force, once per game, gets old Oaths of Moment back, where you get full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound, and Gilliman allows you to select a second Oath target. So you Oath one thing, and then if that thing dies, you get the Oath's benefit on a second thing. He has one unit of Intercessors, a Gladiator Reaper, an Infiltrator Squad, a Land Raider Redeemer, a Reaver Squad. So this one, I think it's on the charge, or maybe it's during the fight phase, forces you to take a Battle Shock. Repulsor Executioner, a Scout Squad, a Storm Speeder Hammer Strike, and a Storm Speeder Thunder Strike. So this one just mostly just has like a lot of Melta weapons, effectively. And then this one gives all of your other vehicles +1 to wound. And then a Terminator Assault Squad, which I don't remember if this one's on the charge or this one's in the fight phase, but the Reavers do one of them, and then the Terminators force a Battle Shock in the other one. And then he has a Calidus Assassin. And going into this one, and going into it, Ruben kind of looked at me and we kind of had a bit of a conversation. He says, I think on most other missions, or most other like primary missions, Guard is pretty favored here. However, we were playing Purge the Foe, Smoke and Mirrors, and Tipping Point. And Smoke and Mirrors is kind of useless for Guard because we already are generally bringing Lord Solar, so we have the ability to put things into reserve anyway, or redeploy them elsewhere on the board. So like having the ability to do an extra one doesn't really matter that much. But the real downside here is Purge the Foe, because on Purge the Foe, it's really hard to dominate primary in the traditional way because Guard doesn't, or Guard just has too many things. So it's very hard for us to consistently get kill more in any way, and so we have to be threatening hold more several times. And then the other part of it that ended up being really brutal is I went first. And so these are the things that end up kind of being a little bit stacked against me. Is the mission is not good for my matchup. And going first on Purge the Foe really sucks because you should expect that your opponent is always going to get a 16 on primary and bottom of 5 for killing more and then holding more, because it's the only time that hold more really comes up all that often is if you're somehow playing Purge the Foe with hidden supplies, which I did at Cali Cup, or you're just going second on Purge the Foe normally. And then the last thing that really hurts was on my turn 1, I draw no prisoners and marked for death as my first 2 secondaries, which are both bricks on Purge the Foe, especially on Tipping Point, because Ruben's not going to let me kill anything on turn 1. And then I spent 1 CP, redrew marked for death, and drew Overwhelming Force instead. So this was really, really tough because 1, I was scoring 0 primary going first for not killing anything, 0 secondary, and no prisoners and Overwhelming Force are great objectives to draw on like turns 2 and 3 in particular, and now they're out of my deck. So I had a really tough draw at the very beginning, and it was compounded by the fact that when Ruben ended up having his first turn, I had ended up parking a Chimera like here-ish, and he had both of his speeders somewhere in here where they were able to move really far and then shoot at the Chimera. And then his Gladiator Reaper was like also, part of this Congo line. But he drew that, or he drew containment and engaged on all fronts. And he didn't get engaged on all fronts, but he was able to do like containment with like Reavers and then like the Scout Squad over here. And yeah, so I was just going first on Purge the Foe and facing a 10-point deficit right out the gate. So I already knew that if I want to win this game, I need to play basically perfectly from here on out, and not only play perfectly, I need to outdraw him and or find a window where I can try and bring the game back. And so what I decided my general play was for the rest of the game was like, I need to be credibly threatening, hold more in order to draw enough of Ruben's things out of the board such that I can try and kill them. And I actually did find a really big opportunity to do so because Ruben had like his Land Raider here, and he should have put it here on turn 1 or turn 2, or on turn 1. But it ended up staying back here. And what this made me realize is even though this middle objective here is super shootable from any angle, I can put a Lone Op unit there. And on turn 2, when I drew Recover Assets and Cleanse, I put a unit of Gaunt's Ghosts on this middle objective. And the only things that he could do to interact with it at all was he had like the Combi Weapon Lieutenant like here, and then like some Scout Squads that could like come to here and get some pop shots off at Gaunt's Ghost. And the other thing that I did in order to make this safer was that I put my unit of Bullgryn here because all the shooting was down in this side of the board. So the Bullgryn were very safe, and they also had the ability to heroic if he ended up going for a charge with the Combi Lieutenant. So I was always going to get hold more on my turn 3. Unless he somehow got crazy luck and like killed Gaunt's Ghost entirely. And I talked to Ruben afterwards, and he was like, "Yeah, I did not see that play, and it was a really, really good play. So you should be happy for finding that." And I was very happy that I did. However, this only brought me back within spitting distance of like actually trying to push myself over the edge. There was one moment where I got fairly unlucky, where I had like my Hellhound here, and he had like normal intercessors strung out like this, and like a Scout Squad, something like this, and I ordered my attacks with 2 Leman Russes over here such that this Scout Squad didn't fully die and lived with 1 model, but it was behind this wall so that I could not actually see it. And that was the difference between between Ruben getting kill more and me tying him on kills. And I think this was on turn 3, which would have been another 4-point swing in my favor. So I started at a -10, and then if I had actually killed off this unit of scouts, I would have put myself only at -2. So at that point, like, if I get a little bit lucky on my draws and Ruben doesn't draw quite as well, I still have an opportunity to try and come back and win. However, and this is where I make a really big mistake and a really unforced error, because leaving this Scout Squad alive on 1 wound, I'm now -6, which is more than I can really hope to like be getting lucky for. And he puts his Calidus over here to do Establish Locus for 4 points. And I take my Tank Commander, which has been hiding here with the idea that it's supposed to like not be visible down this line, and I move it a little bit such that maybe this is like human imperfection with like how the terrain actually is, but where it is visible if he takes his Repex, which has been hiding back over here, and moves past the line such that they can actually see the Tank Commander. And me being lazy, I thought for sure if the Tank Commander was invisible where it was previously, it's still going to be invisible when it goes over here to try and kill the Calidus. And I was wrong. And then the Rep-X comes out and just pops the tank commander. And worse than that, the tank commander, when it dies, he has like a land raider here, and his Terminators had spilled out on the middle objective. This tank commander is just outside of the range of the land raider. So it's not going to be able to shoot the Demolisher cannon. It can only shoot like the las cannon and the plasma cannons, which is like is never going to be killing a land raider unless I roll absolutely stupid hot and Ruben rolls stupid cold. So that was the spot. So when this tank commander dies, that's what ends up killing the game. Like I go from like maybe it's recoverable if the tank commander like continues hiding, and I have my Leman Russ battle tank that's over here go back and kill the Calidus instead. Because then I have both the Leman Russ, which can come out over here, and the tank commander, which can pop out over here and try and kill all of his Terminators, which are now in the middle of the board. However, I do want to give Ruben some credit because he actually found his meme, and it was not just a dream. So at one point, on turn 3, he draws Area Denial, and I have my unit of Bullgryn strung out something like this. And he has his unit of Reavers here, and they go ahead and they charge the Bullgryn. His Land Raider, which is at this point now like here, moves up to be on the point. The Terminators spill out. Okay. And they are the ones with the funny enhancement where every time you fail a battle shock, something dies. And so the Reavers charge in. One Bullgryn dies to the battle shock from them. The Terminators come in. I think another Bullgryn dies from a battle shock off of that. And then he swings in with all of his Terminators, and he ends up killing like 2 more. So all I have left is 2 Bullgryn here. However, this actually might have been a spot where I could have come back because I had the Bullgryn still within 3 inches of the center, so Ruben ended up getting 0 on his Area Denial. And then immediately after that, I Battle Shock again, and I lose a 5th Bullgryn such that I only have 1 of them left, which is really funny. So his like enhancement ends up killing 3 Bullgryn, which is 110 points worth of like big beefy dudes. But overall, as we get towards the end of the game, like the writing is very clearly on the wall. Losing the tank commander over here kills my ability to do kill enough Terminators back. And as we just like kind of score out the 5th turn, we end up agreeing on a score of 78 to 87. And overall, I felt very pensive about this over the past like day and a half. So I didn't do anything yesterday because I went to get a new tattoo, and then I had a poker night. And I think other than this tank commander, and I made like one other mistake, which he let me correct, where I had like the Leman Russ here, and it could like only see 1 Terminator. And then I shot something else in the wrong order, and he's like, no, move your battle tank so it can actually like shoot. It killed like another Terminator, so I was like, whatever, it didn't really matter anyway. But losing the tank commander over here crippled my ability to come back. But I still think, considering I went first on a mission that was not good for me, and then I bricked my turn 1, and my opponent started with a 10-point lead, also knowing he's probably going to get another 8 towards the end on the Purge the Foe going second, I still think I played pretty well. So I only really made like one big mistake, or rather like one mistake that was just because I was being lazy. And looking at something like an 18-point deficit just kind of going into turn 2, ending the game with a 9-point deficit, I think is not bad. And again, I do want to say Ruben, I can tell why he's as good as he is, because when he says things like, yes, or when I say he's like super generous in terms of like, oh yeah, take that back, move your thing such that you do the right thing, right? That's the attitude of a player who is going to be really, really good, because he wants to make sure that he is always making sure his opponents are playing at their best and not making any of these lazy mistakes. And I'll be honest, like, if I'm playing in a GT or something, and my opponent makes a lazy mistake, you know, if they ask, I'll often say, yeah, dude, do the thing you would have if you were thinking about it for more than half a second. But Ruben will go out of his way, and he'll do one better than that and say, no, do the thing like do the thing I know you're supposed to be doing right now. And he will proactively tell you that. And that is, again, the attitude of someone who's going to get good very quickly because he wants absolutely no wins for free. And I got a lot of respect for that. Ruben was a fantastic opponent, very good player, now playing for Team USA Academy, so he gets to do like all their cool scrims. And it like playing against Ruben like that makes me want to be not just like a higher skilled player, but also a more generous player as well, because I think that'll also help me get better in the long run. But anyway, yeah, great event overall. I had a lot of fun. Again, thanks to Chris, thanks to all of my opponents. This was, let's see, Bob was great, Charlie was great, Andrew was great, Dash was great, Ruben was great. Like this might have been the GT where I've had the most fun, just like playing games with strangers. So really have to say, really enjoyed it. I ended up losing at the final table, which I was not super happy about. But again, more pensive and more like contemplative than I was like sad about it. Because I did come close, and I finally made it on my own spreadsheet with all the winning guard lists. Anyway, so that's that. I do have another GT coming up this next weekend after Thanksgiving. So any Americans, happy Thanksgiving to all of you for the next couple of days, and I will be back next week with another after action report. I don't know if I have time or the thoughts to really make another video of any kind this week, but maybe I'll do another list review and kind of talk about my expectations for the next GT. But anyway, it's been Josh Joshi Howard. Thank you all for tuning in to this after action report about the Battleshock GT, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.